My name is David Shaw. I'm the Strategic Partnerships Manager at Paragon Software Systems. The sort of challenges that I'm going to talk about today include HGV regulations. So by that I mean things like the London Lorry Control Scheme that you're all familiar with, the low emission zones and the ultra low emission zone that's proposed. But it's not just London where we're finding these zones and these schemes spring up. They're also now becoming more and more common in smaller cities and towns around the UK and also around the world. So Paris, for example, is another city that has a low emission zone and it's a proposed total diesel ban by 2025. So these are becoming more and more prevalent. There's also issues now around HGV restrictions. So by that I mean height, weight, width and length information. This has been around for ages. We're all used in the UK to having to handle the low bridges. But there are many of these schemes that are based on weight restrictions, for example. So Budapest is an example of a city that has restricted zones based on the weight of a vehicle, and that dictates which vehicle you can use to make deliveries into certain parts of that city. You also have to think about risk-assessed routes these days. I think this is becoming more of a problem with the move towards convenience shopping and the smaller format stores in urban areas, and it's not appropriate necessarily to send a large vehicle into these urban areas. So maybe the shortest route or the fastest route to a destination isn't the appropriate route, so you have to consider that as well. You may have social responsibilities to consider also. So this includes things like, well, do we really want to drive past a school at the drop-off or the pick-up time? Or perhaps you're leasing a shed that's next to a residential area, and as part of that lease agreement, you're not allowed to drive your vehicles through that residential area. We're all familiar with roadworks. I think they're particularly bad in the UK at the moment as the upgrade to the smart motorway. And of course, peak traffic is just becoming worse and worse every day in congestion. In terms of events, you may also want to be considering how events are going to affect your planning and your routing of your vehicles. So there are many in London like Notting Hill Carnival or the Marathon or the Ride London, where we see either a complete road closure or a rolling road closure. But it also could be that you're running fixed routes past a stadium such as the Ricoh Arena on a regular basis, and when you know that there's a home match on, the extra traffic into the area just means that there's worse congestion, and how do you handle that as part of your operation? And then finally, not such a problem in this country, but in other countries there might be areas that you want to avoid because there's a high possibility of hijacking, or depending on the type of product you're carrying, there's a certain sensitivity over that. So why are these challenges important for you transport operators to consider? Well, it's very simple really. It's costing the industry a small fortune. So although I've introduced around 8 or so different challenges there, I've just focused on 2 on this slide, the London Lorry Control Scheme and bridge strikes. Now last year alone there was £2.73 million worth of fines to operators and drivers through contravening the London Lorry Control Scheme, but that large sum is quite frankly dwarfed by the estimated costs that the FTA believes operators incur through having to go drive extra mileage to handle the London Lorry Control Scheme diversions. So that's things like additional mileage, so additional wear and tear on your vehicles, additional time and driver hours, etc., and fuel of course. There are also now statistics available from Network Rail that state that around 1,800 bridges are struck annually at an estimated cost of £16 million to the industry, and Network Rail now have the right to try and claim back 100% of those costs against the operator that causes that problem. So just from those 2 alone, for the industry, it's getting towards £50 million a year in costs. So this is a significant problem that needs to be considered. So how is the industry currently handling this? Well, you're all experienced in what you do. Some of you may be producing a paper-based driver pack that contains the risk-assessed route, or perhaps you're already using a planning tool that has some sort of map editing capability so you can close a road off when you know there's a roadwork affecting it. Maybe the satellite navigation you have in your cab handles height, weight, width and length information. Or perhaps you've had an organisation like Network Rail down to your business as part of your driver training program to help them understand considerations. But I think it's becoming a struggle to create a feasible plan now when you take into account the large and growing number of these time-related lorry restrictions. So although the industry is handling this to the best of their ability, these incidents are still occurring. Paragon, we work very closely with our clients. I can think of a large client that makes daily deliveries into London, and this is such a problem for them. They've actually employed a team specifically to look at reducing fines that they incur on their routes into London. And they've made a significant dent in the fines, but they're still incurring £250,000 in fines every year, not just from the London Lorry Control Scheme, but other schemes within London that they contravene. So what Paragon and Microlise have done is we've now developed technology to help you handle these issues properly. We've gone about this in two ways. First of all, we've thought about ensuring that the plan is compliant, and then secondly we thought about, well, how do we make sure that that compliant plan is then followed by the driver in the cab. So Paragon has developed a system called Route Control. This enables planners to build compliant routes, which cuts the time spent on manual planning, minimises the impact of the restrictions that I've already spoken about, and therefore lowers the risk of you as an operator incurring these penalty fines. With Route Control, our customers can create rules that apply approved route deviations, minimising the impact of the restrictions. They can do this by specific times of the day, or by week, or by month, and by truck type, and that reduces the number of manual interventions required by the planner. And this is standard functionality that's now available in version 6 of the Paragon software. What we've then done is we've developed functionality called waypoint mapping. So we spend a lot of time and effort ensuring that the plan is compliant, and we now need to make sure that that plan is passed through to the driver in the cab. So while the Transport Office could print out a route manifest, that could easily be ignored in favour of a driver's preferred route or a sat-nav recommended route. And indeed we have a small client that's based in a small rural town in England, and the council has said that there's a roundabout right outside their depot. They're not allowed to go straight on at that roundabout. They can take a left turn or they can take a right turn, but if they go straight on, their vehicles will go through the town centre and they're fined. All their own drivers understand this because it's part of their driver training. But this company also uses quite a large number of agency drivers, and those agency drivers cost the company £20,000 a year in fines because they ignore the prescribed risk-assessed route and go off route. So what Paragon Waypoint Mapping does is it feeds the Paragon compliant plan that's been generated through Route Control into the driver's sat-nav device, and it guides the driver then turn by turn, helping ensure that the actual route followed is the same as the planned route that's compliant. It's at this point that we hand the information over to Microlise, so I'd like to introduce Bernie to you. Bernie's just going to talk a little bit more about the Microlise Journey Management and the Drive tab.
Thank you. Morning. So, Paragon then used to plan the route, taking into account the route overrides that have been available to us at a number of points in the system. So typically, when we load the plan in from Paragon, we will pull down the waypoints, but we can also recall or pull down those waypoints at the point of resource allocation. This means that you can either plan your resources at a detailed level in Paragon or at a resource type in Paragon, and do your actual allocation or reallocation of resources within Microlise and have those reflected in the waypoints that are used. So if you move, for example, from a single decker trailer to a double decker trailer, we'll recall the Paragon waypoint server to get accurate turn-by-turn details for that class of vehicle. Having got the information into Microlise, it's available to view for a number of consumers of that information. So for the pre-brief clerk to look at the planned route, to share that planned route with the driver, to answer any questions, etc. As we then execute the journey, to allow us to monitor the execution against the Paragon plan, to highlight any exceptions, whether we're running late, early, etc. And obviously post execution as well, to allow for a comprehensive debrief against the planned route, to really understand why it is there were any exceptions to that plan. As David mentioned, the plan is also passed down to the driver, so using the Microlise mobile application deployed onto a ruggedized tablet or even a consumer Android device, we can pass those turn-by-turn instructions to the driver. We can present those as simple text, or we can seed ALK Copilot Truck Edition, or we have our own route guidance module, a low-cost alternative, if you like, to a full sat-nav application. And all of those will take those turn-by-turn instructions to ensure the driver has all the information he needs to execute the route correctly. On that same application, we were also able to capture what we call debrief on the go reason codes. So anytime the driver is deviating from the Paragon plan, having got to, for example, his site, we can ask him to explain or select a reason code for any deviation. This means that when we come back to when he comes back to the depot at the end of the day, we've already got most of the reasons captured for that deviation. And of course, we're able to then use those to feed back into the planning system to better fine-tune the plan. Because we've now got accurate routes in the system, we're able to better drive our KPI and PVA reports. So again, being able to really understand what it is that's causing us to go off plan, incur additional mileage, incur additional man time. And all of that means fundamentally that with the joined up solution of Paragon and Microlise, we've got a continuous feedback loop to ensure that we are continuously improving the Paragon plan, that we are continuously executing a tighter operation in adherence to that plan and saving you time and money. Okay, thank you.
So I'd just like to wrap up by finishing with three key takeaways. So what we've tried to demonstrate today is that these regulations and restrictions are costing the industry a significant amount of money, and that it's very important that the impact of these restrictions are understood up front, not only to your business and the bottom line and the difference it makes to your profitability, but also the impact it has on your customers and the customer service levels that you can offer them. To help you remain compliant and ensure that your operation remains as efficient as possible, both Paragon and Microlise have developed joint technology to help you manage this, and this functionality is available now. And thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the Transport Conference.